Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Today, what's new in Arbortext webinar. Today we'll hopefully try to go through some of the release highlights that went through for the different Arbortext products. And with me here today, my name is Gil Schroitman. I'm the Product Management Director for Arbortext here at PTC. Patty Latsky, who is the Product Management Senior Director for Arbortext, and Simon Tyler, who is the Principal Product Manager in my team as well. And today we'll try to go through some of the, maybe before we jump into the details, we'll explain a little bit on, what product we have in our portfolio for those of you who are not familiar with the details. So our product portfolio spans across the multiple create, manage, and deliver domains, help our users create, manage, and deliver content at the point of service. And those are really the products that come into play in that mix. On the Arbortext authoring side, editor, styler, web editor, reviewer, layout developer, and ISO and Creo Illustrate. On the managed piece, we are integrated into the Windchill suite of products with Windchill Advanced and Premium, service information and service parts. And on the delivery side, we have the publishing engine and Arbortext content delivery. And today we are going to go through some of the highlights here that are listed, the recent releases that's been already released in the market in the last couple of months, as well as the ones that coming up just in a couple of days here in December. And this is the full list of versions that we are going to go through today, starting with the Web Editor 2.2 that's been released in April, and Editor Styler Publishing Engine 8.2.3 and 8.3 that's expected in just a couple of days now. Layout Developer and Layout Editor 12.2.3 that's already been released, and 12.3 that's expected again in a couple of days. The Windchill Service Parts Information and Instructions 13.02 and 13.1 that's expected later this month. And lastly, Arbortext Content Delivery with its latest CPSs as well as 7.2.1 that's also expected to be released to market in about a week. Okay, so with that, I'll hand it over to Patty, and she will cover some of the areas that I just mentioned.
Okay, thanks, Gil. The first topic is about our web editor. Oops. Where do I advance this slide, Gil?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
You should have control now.
I see. So yes, our last web editor release was in April of 2024, and it had some nice new features, including support for information structures and publication structures. The document states are now displayed in the panel badges in the outline view. There's a new action for insert section, obviously related to the publication structure. This one is nice. The application configuration files are now in a centralized folder structure. So this is similar to what we've had for Arbortext Editor for a long time, but the idea is, similar to our custom folder. You're now able to search for documents by the Windchill number, in addition to how it was done before. And there's also support for file entities. And one thing that's particularly good for those of you who used earlier versions is that at this point, the features in the Oberon Titania Web Editor and in the PTC Arbortext Web Editor are on par. So there are not any features in Oberon's that are not in ours. Now Oberon is working on the next version. We're expecting it some point around, say, the first quarter of 2025. We don't have an exact date yet for when that would be available. It may be around similar to last year, around April timeframe, but as soon as we know the date, we will post that. And just as an example, oh, here we go. One example here, this is showing editing the publication structure. So in the web editor, or I should say on the left, in Windchill, just as we've always had this option that says open all topics in Arbortext Editor, now if you're on a publication structure, you can also do open in Web Editor or open in Web Reviewer. And it'll give you a view similar to what you see on the right, where you get the kind of outline view of the structure, and then you get the list of the different topics in that publication structure. And in this particular example, the one called engine oil level is currently checked out to the current user, but the one above it, cranking motor assembly, is not. So you could see the green icon, the padlock icon. Behind the scenes, essentially, it's creating a read-only map. So this is not a situation where you can modify the pub struct, but you can sort of see it and see the topics in the context of the publication structure. Okay, moving on to our editor and publishing engine releases. We did have a maintenance release back in May. The primary work that went on with that was supporting Windchill Plus, and I have quite a bit more information in a few minutes about this and how we support Windchill Plus using the new publishing architecture. Otherwise, it was pretty much a standard maintenance release with bug fixes and updating our Creo View version. Now coming up, hopefully later this week, if not, very soon in December, is our feature release, our Arbortext 8.3. And so these are the highlights. Some of these I'll go into more detail in just a minute. But first will be on the list is publishing from Windchill Plus using VCS. And like I said, I'll go into that in more detail. The second one has to do with the ability to include Windchill part attribute data directly in XML documents. This is something that has been requested for some time, and I'll show you some examples of what that can do. One of the feedback that we've gotten is with regards to our toolbars, that the previous default view was a little too busy. So now the out-of-the-box display will look like what you see here on the screen, and it'll just have this one toolbar. Now, of course, you can always enable the other toolbars or adjust them similar to what you've always been able to do before. We've also added support for MathML editing. This is working with a third-party company called Wirus. And this is the editing support that we've added. Our publishing support will be coming next year. And I have a little more detail on that coming up as well. Windchill REST services, enhancements for dynamic documents. We continue to enhance our Windchill REST services. And in particular, one of the areas that was lacking before was the ability to create new dynamic documents using these REST services. So we have implemented that now. And this would include creating the document, uploading the content to it, and so on. So that actually is coming with Windchill 13.1. a few other items coming in our soon to be released 8.3. We will have an allow list for where external entities can come from, and I do have a little more details on that in a minute. We've added a desktop composer license. You can sort of think of it as kind of renaming what used to be our print composer license, but it also, we used to have kind of a separate license that was specifically for additional capabilities around web and wireless. So those are now merged, and it's called Desktop Composer License, and it would include the capabilities from both of those earlier licenses. As is typical, we've also updated the versions of CreoView and IsoView, and will now be based on Java 21 and TopCat 10. So let me go a little more in detail on some of those items. First, the Windchill part attributes in XML content. So basically, this is the ability to merge content from Windchill that is on, say, a WT part into your XML document. You would define in your DCF file, your doc type configuration file, you would define which element is to be used for this type of a insertion. And then it also in there, also in your burst config file, you indicate where to find, say, the part, the reference to the part, and then also which attribute to pull in. So you could see sort of on the left, and a little bit of a contrived example, but just to show how it would work. On the left, it's pulling in from this particular part, and it's using the attribute called scag nuts. And the idea here is, it's saying the number of scag nuts for this model is 3. So this data is coming directly from the Windchill part. And then on the other hand, on the other side, it's a different part number, and in that case, the attribute value is 4. It shows you the general idea of kind of pulling in these attribute values. And then at the bottom, you see the parts that it's coming from. Yeah, thank you for the thumbs up. I know this is something folks have wanted for some time now. This gives you an idea of what it looks like, what the UI looks like in Arbortext Editor. The general idea is that for this element, since it has been defined as one that points to a part in Windchill, if you click on the browse button, the 3 dots for the href, it'll bring up a ability to search for parts in Windchill. You can specify where to search, whether it's a particular subtype of the part, whether you should include the subtypes below that. You can fill in name, number, created, last modified. And then when you click on search, you'll get a listing of the parts in Windchill that meet the criteria that you've provided. And then at that point, you would select the one that's appropriate, click modify, and then it would update your href to point to that part. And I don't show it here, but there's also, as I showed in the previous one, there would be an attribute on this element for which of the Windchill attributes of that part you're pulling in at that particular point in the document. As you might expect, you also get the traceability. So if you're in Windchill and you're looking at a part, you can see the list of documents that are connected to that part, that are pulling data in from that part. And if you look at a particular document in Windchill, you would see the list of parts that you reference. And you can certainly pull in this attribute from that part, from one part, a different attribute from a different part that, as appropriate for your document content. Now in Windchill 13.1, so that's the Windchill version that's due out in December, later this month, we do support publishing individual topics, but the ability to publish this content from either a publication structure or information structure, that will be coming in a later Windchill version, at one of the 2025 Windchill versions that are coming up. Okay, the next enhancement is for MathML editing. So here, as I said, we're working with a partner. Some of you longtime Arbortext folks might remember there used to be a system called MathFlow that we used to integrate with, and that is no longer available, but MathType is essentially the replacement. The third-party company is called Wirus. And the general idea here is if you have MathML content in your document, the way it'll show in the edit canvas is as a graphic that is generated from the MathType system. If you were to click on the edit button, the little pencil, it'll bring up their dialog where you can make whatever changes you need to make to your equation. And you can see it's a very rich equation editor, very full featured. Once you're happy with the changes you made, you would click on the add equation, and then this graphic would update to match what you had just edited, and the markup will update also to match whatever editing you had just done in that editor. There is also the ability, if you make a change in the Arbortext side, so if you make some change to the markup, let's say you just need to make a minor change, you can also click on this refresh button and it'll send the markup to MathType. MathType will generate a new graphic so that you can see here what the new graphic would look like. Now, the up until a recent version of MathType, the way this would work is the content, in other words, when you're interacting with this editor, this MathML editor, it's actually sending the content back to Wirus, to a server, that they manage. But actually, their most recent version does support installing that server on-prem. So for customers with sensitive data that don't want their MathML equations being sent over the internet, you can set up your full MathType system on-prem, and nothing has to get sent back to Wirus. But it still does support the previous version methodology. So it's kind of up to the customer to decide, do you want the whole server installed locally, or will you just be interacting with this dialog that sends the data back to the Wirus server? Oh, and I don't think I mentioned this, the support for publishing this, out of the box using our publishing tools will be coming in, it's scheduled for 2025. Okay, the next to talk about is the allow list. So this is basically, as you might imagine, a security feature. And what it does is limits where any external files can come from. So things like X-includes, entities, conrefs. And the idea here is to prevent the possibility of a malicious document where, the malicious document might be trying to pull in content that should not be available to to be published. So the initial list would include where PE is installed, the installation directory, any custom or application directories you might have, the temp directory that's being used for publishing, the adapter directory, and then of course any Windchill content that would start with a X-WC prefix. Additional locations can be added to this endorse list, allow list, using an ACL function. So, if you have additional places where the content needs to come from in a published job, you can add either a specific location or a regular expression for where to find the content. And this does support, essentially a regular expression that would say you can look anywhere, essentially just star if you need that for debugging. Of course, we would recommend taking advantage of this as a security feature to, like I said, avoid support for malicious documents that might be published. Okay, my next topic is about this publishing from Windchill Plus. So Windchill Plus, as you know, is the SaaS version of Windchill. And so in order to publish, we've introduced a new architecture for essentially SaaS publishing. So if you're using Windchill Plus and you're using Arbortext, certainly if you're using service information or service parts where you've got information structures and publication structures and parts list, you need Arbortext Publishing Engine in order to be able to get the output from those structures. VCS stands for Visualization Content Services. And from Windchill Plus, only VCS is supported. So not the standard way of publishing with a server, a publishing engine server, for instance, on a VM, the way our previous cloud, like PTC Cloud, was set up. And next slide goes into a little more detail of, well, what does this mean? But the initial support will be with Windchill 13.02. And then Arbortext 8.3 will be the initial version deployed. Now, the important thing to realize here is this really is SaaS. So PTC will update the version of PE that is being used, soon after it's released. So for instance, next spring, when we have a maintenance release 8.3.1, you would expect a little bit after that VCS will be running the 8.3.1 version of Publishing Engine. Now, Windchill 13.02 is expected to be available for Windchill Plus use early in 2025. I haven't seen an actual date yet. Now, since this is SaaS, since the version of PE will get updated by PTC, it is important to keep customizations to be minimal. There is no ability, for instance, to reach out to an external database as part of a publishing job. And we do have a technical support article that goes into more details about that. So if you want to learn more about what we call the guardrails for Publishing Engine with Windchill Plus, I'll refer you to this tech support article. So, not to necessarily get all the specific details of this chart, but the general idea is that multiple Windchills can send jobs to the VCS architecture. Within VCS, it will direct the job to the Arbortext service for publishing. And essentially, this is a publishing engine that gets spun up when the publishing request is made. Now, since Publishing Engine will be handling jobs from multiple Windchills, and since it gets spun up, any configurations, essentially any custom folders, any application folders that is needed for the publish job will be stored in Windchill. So you essentially zip up your custom folder, store it in Windchill, and then as part of the publish job, in addition to the data being published, is this configuration that should be used for that publish job. And since that's done in that way, that means that, this VCS system, it could handle production requests or, development tests, so development requests. For instance, if your custom folder, if you're trying out a change to it or a new version of your custom folder, you would just store that in Windchill alongside the production one, and then the published job would be able to use the correct, basically zip file from Windchill as part of the publish request. Now, just a few other things to mention about Windchill Plus and Arbortext. This is kind of a simpler chart, similar to the previous one, but a little easier to read. So a few things to mention. One is that Arbortext Editor will be connecting to Windchill Plus, directly similar to what you're familiar with. But of course, the Arbortext Editor user, similar to what we've had before with cloud deployments, if they need to do a publish, then they need to either publish from Windchill, or if they're publishing from their editor, the editor won't have direct access to a publishing engine. So you would need the Print Composer option for publishing directly from editor. But publishing from Windchill, again, the request goes to the VCS service. It would get directed to the Arbortext publishing engine that's running inside VCS. Then if the output is, say, a PDF or HTML, the type of output that gets returned to Windchill, similar to any other publishing engine request, it'll get returned to Windchill and stored as a representation on whatever, either the structure or the document that was being published. And, just as before, you can have post-publish rules that would, for instance, take that representation and create a first-class object for it, or anything else that you've done with your publishing rules in the past. But if the output is a bundle for use in Arbortext content delivery, then that would get stored in a customer-specific Azure blob. And then Arbortext content delivery will pull the bundle from that Azure blob. And one other thing to mention about using Arbortext with Windchill Plus has to do with translation. In the Windchill Plus environment, your translation packages would be stored inside Windchill. So you could, for instance, create a library where the translation packages get created, and then they would get uploaded to that library once the translation is complete. The ability to store translation packages in Windchill, that's something we've actually had for the past couple of years. It's not new, but in this SaaS environment, it's essentially the only way that you can interact with your translation packages. We wouldn't support, for instance, a shared file system or something like that. Okay, so that's my information about editor and publishing engine. I'll move on to our SIM SP for basically our Windchill modules. Now you'll notice I call it SI and SP. There is some once again some new packaging coming where my understanding is that the what had recently been called SPII for Service Parts Information and Instructions is going to be separated out again. So there'll be a service information and a service parts module. But there'll be more information about that from the Windchill packaging folks. But going back in time just a little bit to the June release, so the 1302 release, as I mentioned, a fair amount of the work related to publishing using the VCS architecture, well, that's supported with 1302. So our team was busy working on that. But we also have a nice new feature that got added into the service parts, where for Creo Illustrate, so when you send your parts list to Creo Illustrate, there's a new attribute on the part list item, and it's called callout. And what this does is it allows you to explicitly say whether or not you want a callout to be in your Creo illustration for this part list. Previously, it was just tied to the serviceable attribute. So you had to basically set serviceable to indicate the callout, but now it's a separate attribute. So it gives you a little more control over what gets created in the Creo Illustrate illustration. And here's an example of that. You can see on this particular parts list for item 4, while it is serviceable, but explicitly the callout is set to no. And so in this diagram, we don't see the callout number 4 because for item number 4, that attribute was set to no. There's a few other examples here. For instance, if callout is not set at all, then the serviceable, would take effect. And of course, there's still the illustrated attribute as well. Now, looking forward, as I said, the next release of Windchill is coming 13.1 later this month. And the new feature here that's coming is the ability to include, when you're publishing a information structure or publication structure, when you're publishing that to Arbortext Content Delivery, so that's the bundle publishing, you can request that all the representations for the parts in the part list should be included in that bundle. So prior to this, only the default representation would be published, but we had customers for which they wanted to be able to have additional options in the ACD display. And so what this will do is, if you set this publishing rule parameter, it's called include all representations for part. If you set it to true, then it will include multiple representations rather than just the default. But it is backward compatible, so the default would be to maintain the previous behavior and only include the default representation. So I believe that's my last slide. Are we taking questions in the middle, or are we going to wait and do questions at the end?
I don't see any questions in the Q&A panel, Patty, for you.
Okay, great. Okay. Well then, time for Simon. On to you.
Okay, I'll see if I can take control. So I'm going to be talking about the work that my guys have done for Styler and for ALD and ALE. Hopefully I've got control now. How do I test that? Here we go.
Yeah, they are good to go.
Thank you, Gil. Okay, so done a few things. We'll talk about the publishing side of things first. So one of the things that we've introduced in this release is the ability to use the ALD or APP XSLFO library, which we implemented and delivered last year in the standalone product, in publishing engine and if you're using editor or desktop publisher or styler or whatever to generate your output. So you can now there's a preference to use the APP XSLFO print engine. As you can see down here in the bottom right, there's a choice. You can either use what we call the legacy one, which is the FOSSI-based XSLFO engine, or you can select to choose APP. If APP is selected, then in your publish dialog, you will be able to select an XSL file. So a file will be the one that's used to transform your XML into an XSLFO instance. We also allow you to select an APP template. So we ship one by default with that name that you can see there. That has everything in it that you need to be able to process the XSLFO instance and call the library implementation. But if you wanted to extend your library implementation or add some extra functionality or extra page layouts or anything else that you want to in ALD land, then you can use a template of your own. You can base it on the existing one that we ship. And so you've got the option to select it there. You also have the option to select a print config file. So if you wanted to generate ALD documents during it based on your print config file, then you can do that. If you want to have different options like graphic downsampling, then you would edit your APP print config file. So we ship for DocBook a new sample XSL file. It'll be up to you to write your own for your content that you're getting and the example XSLFO that you want to generate. But I would encourage you to give it a try, see how you get on with it. The FO library is fairly complete from a basic point of view. There is support for indexing, tables of contents, running headers, footers, all the different page region stuff, and the majority of the text formatting things. One thing I would say though is because it's XSLFO and the standard doesn't lock things down very, very strictly, you would see differences between the two outputs between this implementation and our legacy one, as well as any other XSLFO rendering tool that you might choose. So be aware of that. You know, there is slack built into the spec to make things implementation specific. But yeah, so this is the first new feature that we rolled out in our publishing land. Hopefully in the next year or so we'll be able to use our CSS library as well, so you can publish using that too, but we'll see how we go with that. Now let's see if I can get on to the next. No, that's not working. Here we go. So one of the things that we've had a lot of requests for from the ALD users is the ability to have a dedicated version of Publishing Engine specifically for those guys. So if you are publishing simply using the f=app request type, which allows you to specify what we call an activation file as your XML part of the request, then you can now use this specific version of Publishing Engine rather than the full-blown Publishing Engine. So this version is a lot more cost effective than the full-blown version, but it is very limited. So there's no Windchill integration. You cannot use it for f=convert type processes. And it is only really there for use with an APP template. So your activation file will contain a list of input files, a list of output files, and an APP script chunk, which will allow you to set some variables and then open an APP template. That APP template will be one that you've written that would accept the variables that you set, process the job and generate the output. And the return from that is an HTML file which states whether the job is successful or not. The success criteria are whether the output files are where they say where you've asked them to be. It's not whether the job is finished or not. Okay, so this is a very specific version of Publishing Engine for the ALD users to be able to deploy a managed server with scalable production facilities on their systems. So here's a bit more information about it. As I said, it's only for the F equals APP request type, and the limitations are explicit. So no Windchill integration, no connectivity with editor or any XML processing involved, no graphic conversion, no F equals convert requests. So it's purely only for those F equals APP requests. I'd also say that you would need to convince me that this is a good fit for you in order to be able to purchase it too. So that's that one. Now let's move on to the ALD features for 12.3, which are coming at the same time as the rest of the Arbortext release. So we've done a lot of work on the interface. We do this every release cycle. We update some dialog boxes, add some new ones just to make the product easier to use. The first one is a new feature to insert characters. This allows you to select a font and then select a character from within that font. And when you hit insert, it will put the necessary information into the content stream that you're editing at that time. It is sensitive to the current font. So when you call up this dialog box, the current typeface will already be selected. If you select a character from a different typeface, you will see processing instructions appear in your content to change the typeface, so that you can actually output that character. The character list is color-coded, so characters which are in the type will be in blue, characters which are missing will appear in red. So obviously it'll help you to make the right choice of the character that you're inserting. The characters which are missing won't be shown, obviously. And it features a preview. Now, I think I'll talk about this a bit later on, but this preview window is another new feature for APP dialog boxes. If you're writing your own, you can now specify a string to be rendered in a preview, and APP will embed that within the dialog box, so you can actually see what your text looks like with certain formatting properties applied to it. Let's move on to the next slide. Come on. Come on. Gil, could you try progressing it? It doesn't seem to want to do it for me. Oh, here we go. Okay, so as I mentioned, we do our best to update a number of different dialog boxes to improve the interface. This first one is the document properties. So as you know, if you're publishing or familiar with PDFs, there's a document properties section within there where you can set things like the initial view, like whether you want toolbars or not, what view state, zoom state you want, which page you want to open. So the ALD document properties allow you to set all that kind of stuff for both PostScript and PDF. It also lets you set things like the initial, description stuff, like who the author is, what the title is, what the keywords are, that kind of thing. So again, those things are familiar if you're familiar with PDF. They can also be drawn from variables. So there's a way of using a variable within ALD's document properties. So you could, for example, use an XPath expression as a variable, and it will resolve that at publishing time. Okay, so we've updated this dialog box. The old one that we had before was a little bit clunky and didn't work very well if you didn't have Perl installed. So this one now works regardless of whether you have Perl installed or not. We've updated the footnote dialog box. So we've adopted a familiar pattern with this category option here in our dialog boxes rather than the tabs. So this the footnote control stream dialog box has been updated to reflect that. All the same features and functions are there. They're just organized in a little bit better. Index control stream stuff has been updated as well. So you can now edit individual index control streams, and something which was a bit of a surprise to a number of users when I presented this before is that a single index control stream can contain multiple indexes, and you can apply a single index control stream when you're formatting and therefore generate as many indexes from that as you like. The indexes can be simple or advanced. The advanced ones include a whole lot of extra XML-based processing and sorting and collation information. And those dialog boxes to be able to configure those XML indexes have been updated as well to follow the category format too. So that's not only has it improved the interface, but it's also exposed some features which have previously been hidden. So that's a good thing. We've updated the insert markup feature. So for those who don't know, the insert markup feature is a way of creating a tool which can be used in either Layout Developer or Layout Editor and define what that custom markup is, and it will allow you to create a simple toolbar option to insert it. So an example would be creating a special thing for inserting bold or inserting a table or a graphic or bring up a file picker, that kind of thing. Previously, it was just a one-stop shop, so you could only insert a single bit of markup, but this extension to the insert markup feature allows you to group them together. So as you can see down here in this dialog box at the bottom here, you can chain together any number of insert markup definitions and build a custom dialog box from that. Those insert markup definitions allow you to specify things like a title and the field type, that kind of thing, and a verification string, and a couple of other things as like list values, that kind of stuff. Those things are reused in the group dialog box, and the dialog box title up here is then used as the label for the field inside the group. So that's a handy thing. That was a request on our community ideas page, which I heartily recommend everybody goes to, and if they have any feature requests, then tag it in there. This next section, I'm going to talk about a new feature. It's quite a big feature already, but it's only going to grow as we develop and build out this area of functionality. So in lots of different language formatting, there is a requirement to be able to recognize when characters from a class of characters is adjacent to characters from another class of characters, or it's adjacent to a line end or some other sort of formatting event. We originally have a feature called Unipair, and this kind of takes care of some simple line break rules, but we wanted to extend that to be a lot more functional, and to include other types of behaviors as well. So we've introduced a new feature called character classes. There's a new system file which defines a set of character classes. So a character class could be, for example, open punctuation, closing punctuation, Western characters, numbers. It could be hiragana, katakana, character sets. It could be, well, anything you like. You can define your own character classes. And then you have the opportunity to define a set of rules. So how, for example, if you wanted to specify line break rules, then you could say if these characters from these classes appear next to characters from these classes, are you allowed to break between there, for example? So in the 12.3 release, we are releasing sort of some very simple rules, so the line break rules and some hanging punctuation stuff, but we're going to build on that in the future to better support East Asian formatting. So there's a lot of very specific rules about how in the JIS standards, I can't remember the number of it, 4025 it might be, which say how to build lines and how to format lines, and this stuff will be built into the character class stuff in the future. So to better explain it further, there's a new system file, schcharclass.3ad, which defines some sort of default character classes. But there's also a new tag type which allows you to specify your own character classes and your own sets of rules and your own sets of groups of rules. There's a hierarchy of how those different things fit together, and I'll explain that on the next slide. And there's also some properties on the fstyle object which allow you to turn these things off and on and to apply specific groups within those rules. So the structure of the character classes are, and the definitions, you give it a name and then you list the characters within that class. So this could be opening punctuation, or it could be closing punctuation. You can give it a name if you want to have something which is a bit more meaningful than this. Once you've got your classes defined, you can then specify rules. So in this example, we've got the disallow break keyword, which means if I see a character from class 01 followed by a character from any of these classes here, then you can not break a line between those things. And there's an allow break feature as well as other things. Once you've defined your rules, you can then group those rules together into a group. So you can apply a whole set of rules in a single hit by calling the group. And there's instructions in APP's formatting object model to call the group specifically. So the rules that we've introduced in this release are these break rules. So there's an allow break and disallow break keyword. So allow break says you are allowed to break between this class, the before class, and the after classes. The disallow break says that you can not break between this class and these classes here. So any of the characters which are in here will be added to a big list. So when ALD gets to the end of a line, it looks up and says, okay, what can I break between here, and then I'll apply these rules. We've also added overhang rules. So you can say characters from these classes or these individual characters can overhang the beginning of a line or the end of a line. So the overhang end means it can overhang at the end of a line, like this down here, or it can overhang the beginning of a line like this down here. So you can do hanging punctuation now based on the individual characters, and you can create your own groups of characters which can overhang the beginning and the end of the line. And there are instructions now in the style object which allow you to turn on and off the overhang rules. And finally, in this release, we've added ignore rules. So if you want to just subtly stop the rules applying to certain characters, then you can turn that off. We found that was a handy feature when we were testing it, just to be able to turn things off and on easily. And so ignore rules were added just to make it a bit more simple for us. So that's character classes. As I said, we are going to be building that out to improve Chinese, Japanese, and Korean line formatting rules, as well as the spacing between characters, and something called Yakumono, which is a very specific thing of character widths when you format CJK text. Okay, so moving on. Those who don't know, we have a debugger that's attached to ALD, and so we've done some updates to that in order to make things better. The first thing we've done is updated the code mirror library, and that's used to edit code inside the debugger. We've updated it to the latest version, and that came with a bunch of enhancements, things like code folding and code formatting and linting, that kind of thing. And we've also added the ability to split the code window as well. So if you're editing a long tag, then you can do that with ease. So if you want to edit the top and the bottom of it at the same time, you can sort of split it and edit the two areas together. The code linting is a really handy feature. So this will check your JavaScript code for you to look for potential issues. So things like undefined variables, or if your code is getting too complex or whatever. And there's a whole load of options that you can set in order to improve or reduce the amount of strictness that the code linting is applying. The interface has been updated to show where those errors are. So there's stuff in the margin of the code edit window. There's also a console panel which can pop up to show you where those things are, and it's interactive, so you can click on them, take you to the next thing. Really useful feature. I've been using it a lot in our daily builds, and I found it very, very useful. We've added the ability to preview object graphics now in the debugger. So object graphics are vector-based graphics in ALD, and previously you can preview them in the debugger, although you could preview bitmap graphics. But now we can preview those in the debugger too. Object graphics now in the debugger, which is really cool. We've also added some new guides to the WYSIWYG page view. So previously we had things like blocks and frames and tables and lines and styles, but now we've added some extra ones so you can see which character is being output at a certain point, and there's a box drawn around the character to show its height and width and where the baseline is, that kind of thing. There's one for kerning, so if your font is applying kerning or you've manually applied kerning, you can see where that kerning is being applied. And you can also now see where references are. So references are things which generate content which might be used, for example, in footnotes or in running headers or as anchor positions or as index collation points. And you can now see what those are and what the content of those things is as well. We've also done some minor updates too in ALD. So the FO and the CSS libraries have been updated. Again, we released the FO library last year, and we did some more work on it this year just to make it a bit more functional so that we can use it nicely with the rest of Arbortext. So indexing has been added, and a couple of other things to make it nicer. There's this dialog box preview option, which I mentioned when I was talking about the character insert dialog box. There's now a new option to point to different font control streams when you start up, so you can call different sets of fonts if you want to. We've updated our line endings to have round, pointed, or square line endings to fit more with what other people do in other applications. And we've also added a new feature in our tag browser, so you can open it where you want to rather than opening up in the tag editor. So that's everything from me. If anybody got any questions, let me know.
Simon,
Thank you.
we did have one question from Clay. This was related to the XSL FO processing.
Yep.
He said there was a lot of processing, basically transformation done on the editor client before sending to PE. Will this be different with the APP XSL FO engine?
Yes, I don't know what transformation stuff was done with the legacy engine, should we call it? But with the APP approach, we just apply the XSL that you specify as the style sheet, and the result of that transformation gets given to APP to format and to process. Okay, so there would be just that one single transformation, and then the output of that will be given to the APP engine to process and generate the PDF. At the moment, APP does seem to take like 4 or 5 different formatting passes of the content. I haven't got to the bottom of why that's happening yet, but on the PE side, it doesn't do anything more than that single transformation. So I hope that helps you, Clay. If you want to have a chat about it, give me a shout and I'll come online and have a meeting with you.
Okay, thanks, Simon. Okay. That was the only question we had.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Simon and Patty, for the little overview here. Just a reminder for everyone before we dive into the next section, which is ACD. If you have any questions, please make sure to put those in the Q&A section rather than in the chat, and we'll try to cover those at the end. Okay, so Simon, if you can just release the control, please. Okay, thank you. Okay, so next section, as I said, we had a couple of releases for ACD, starting with the 7205. That's been the CPS that's been released back in March 2024. A couple of key things that we announced there. First and foremost, the LDAP integration. We have extended the ability for customers to control the user's access and privileges provisioning directly from the enterprise attributes, from the attributes that the maintainer on their corporate LDAP. Previously, this mechanism was set up only for the initial registration of users. But with that enhancement, we are actually making it a working tool for customers to be able to control as well as update on regular basis the privileges and access control rules for users in ACD. So that's very powerful enhancement. The next one is we extended the ability of the ACD search mechanism to look into general content that's not kind of contextualized or related to a specific product, family, or model. So that's been requested by a couple of customers, and we managed to address that in that release. And lastly, we also improved or came up with a simplified URLs, navigation URLs that also been used for our integration. First and foremost, with ServiceMax, we introduced that integration, search link integration between ServiceMax and ACD back in July, and also for other customer integration needs. So we're expecting this improvement to be very useful in that regards, and it provides full flexibility, allowing you to construct a direct URL to a specific search results page based on whatever information type you want to pull out, specific product or cell number preferences, as well as languages. So hopefully this will streamline that need. And later on, the next release, CPS that we released back in June was 7206. There we have improved a couple of things, starting with our ability to deliver larger SVGs as well as PVZs that are created in Illustrate. We have previously the threshold was only a couple of megabytes, but we've managed to extend the SVG threshold to 18 megabytes. That's the where it stands right now in terms of reasonable performance, but we could also extend it further if needed. It's all configurable in the system, and really depends on the data volume and the complexity that gets into it when it comes to specific data sets, customer data sets considerations. And same goes with the PVZs. We are capable of delivering larger PVZs now with that release. The next enhancement that we introduced, which is going to be very powerful, we're expecting to really kind of be a game changer in terms of our ability to debug issues and improve the lead time of fixing those for customers. So we call it a logs collector utility, which basically it's a task manager task that helps you collect the relevant logs and dumps information at the point of failure, so that customers no longer need to wait for the next issue to come or reproduce the issue for us to be able to debug it. We are capable of just picking the relevant information in the logs and the dumps after the fact. And there is also a flexibility of just defining a specific date range. So if you want to look back into history failures, you can pull that report or a collection of logs based on whatever preference is or date range is needed. And lastly, we also extended the attachment size for feedback tickets that are submitted through ACD. And that's also customizable now. So that's for the CPSS release that we've been working on the last year. There's another one coming up, which is going to be 7208. But the big release that we are also kind of geared towards, that's going to be released in hopefully a week from now, is 721, and there we have invested a lot in improving or addressing some of the technical depth items that we had in that release, bringing all the infrastructure component up to speed, starting with Java, the Amazon Curator, Wildfly, as well as compatibility with the latest and greatest database and operating system, MongoDB 7. It was a big undertaking for us since the last version that we have added what was 3.4, which was out of support. So we really put a lot of effort and investment in bringing infrastructure up to speed and making sure it's reliable and secured. We also updated the ThinkView version to the most up-to-date one to be able to render and deliver PVZ, so 3D graphics, more efficiently with the latest enhancements that's introduced in that version. And Ping Federate was also updated to 11.1.3 for customers that use SSO. Plus, we also introduced support for Azure AD. On the digital thread interoperability section, I call it, we also improved a couple of things around our ability to protect the data at the point of service, making sure that the customer's IP and engineering attributes are not compromised or get to the wrong consumers. So we also invested a lot in that regards. We also improved a couple of REST endpoints that will help us continue extending our integration landscape within the digital thread at PTC with ServiceMax, but also in other areas that we are considering right now, and I'll elaborate more in the future about that. And there is another couple of things that I'm going to go through in dedicated slides here, but another, just to conclude on the high-level overview here, we also introduced a couple of capabilities that will help us enhance our ability to deploy ACD on cloud environments and getting closer to a real or close to SaaS experience for our customers. So I'll talk about it more on the capabilities that we introduced in the coming slides here. So starting with maybe that's probably one of the big ticket items that will help improve our customer experience when it comes to delivering content or identifying what content they actually want to dive into and explore. So we have evolved a mechanism that automatically creates thumbnails based on the content, and we now support it for all types of content, PDFs, XMLs, and graphics files. And of course, it's not contradicting whatever thumbnails are already created in the system or manually created by customers in previous versions. So we are making sure this is backwards compatible with our existing customer data sets. So, but if those thumbnails are not created, we have a path forward with automating the creation of those for customers. So we're expecting this to be very useful for our customers feature to adopt. And we're also supporting it on all viewpoints on our desktop grid and thumbnails view, as well as on our mobile GUI experience. The next enhancement we introduced, as I said, it's related to the SaaS enablement, I call it, for ACD. We introduced an integration with a couple of tools that will help you customers monitor the health status of the application, starting with machine level metrics like CPU, RAM utilization, license consumption, what's available and currently consumed, as well as other metrics like service machine availability and everything that relates to the infrastructure. And the dashboard that's being presented here comes out of the box with Grafana. That's the dashboarding tool that we use. Customers are required to install and deploy it separately, and we provide all the documentation in our the integration instruction in our documentation. But there is more to it than you can leverage. Once you set up, you can set up additional usage metrics to maybe monitor how the application is being used. And we are also planning to leverage it in that regards in the future to add additional metrics to the mix. So that's about the monitoring dashboard and the integration with Prometheus and Grafana. The next announcement here, which I'm also expecting to be very important for our end user technicians or customers that use ACD on mobile devices. We introduced a full screen mode that helps you maximize illustrations on a full screen. So there is a button that's added on the top right here that helps you, once you click on it, you maximize the screen and you can see and interact with any type of illustration on a full screen mode. Previously, it was just rendered on that very small subsection of the screen, which made it very difficult for our mobile end users to work with. So hopefully with that announcement, it's been streamlined. And obviously, once you want to exit that full screen mode, you just need to click on it and it goes back to the portrait. The last, maybe the next announcement here is the lift and shift tasks. We call this is basically a task that will hopefully help improve the adoption of cloud deployment for our customers. So any customer that's looking to move to cloud, or maybe just even update from an earlier version to 7.1, because 7.1 would require a fresh install due to the many infrastructure changes that we introduced. This lift and shift task, or the two tasks we call the export and import tasks that we introduced here in the task manager, will help our customers move forward and adopt that version. And what it does, basically, the export task help you extract all the content that's been deployed on the previous version, typically 7.2.0 version. And then there is another task that you can use to import it to the 7.2.1 release. And those tasks will also be used to move customers to cloud if they want to move from on-prem to a cloud hosted environment. So again, where I'm expecting those tasks to streamline that need and the ability to upgrade to 7.2.1 in general. The next announcement here, again, with respect to our ACD's ability to integrate with other systems. So we introduced a couple of new REST endpoints that hopefully will improve the ability for customers or third-party end systems to be able to retrieve content directly from ACD and render it in their portal or application of choice, starting with the documentation and the document and part list retrieval. So we introduced two new REST endpoints that will allow you to fetch a part list by its ID or name, and same goes for documents. And we also no longer requiring to specify a context ID, which is the internally generated ID for the model or serial number. You can search or look up for those documents or part list by specifying the model name or the serial number. And as part of that enhancement, we are also automatically really resolving the options and choices set that's applicable to that model or serial number. So providing a similar experience that we already have in the application GUI. So you should be able to get as a similar content and most accurate one also when using the REST endpoints for that matter. So that's for the document and part list retrieval REST endpoints. We also introduced a new REST endpoint that allows you to fetch the entire information structure based on the actual model or serial number name. And again, similar in here, we are automatically resolving the options and choices filter set that's applicable to those models or serial numbers. So that's going to be useful as well if you want to pull out all the content at once and then render it elsewhere in the application of choice. And lastly, we also simplified the book generation flow through the REST endpoints. So we introduced a single REST endpoint that allows you to generate a book print with all the input parameters that's been scattered across multiple REST endpoints previously, including the ability to collect the IDs, the document IDs, specifying the context, the model name or the serial number, the book name, page size, orientation, etc. So everything is now controlled through a simplified single REST endpoint. So that's for the REST endpoints or integration improvements. Another enhancement that made through is, and also got requests from a couple of customers, is the ability for ACD to automatically create a cart when no cart is created or assigned as active in the system. So slightly improving the user experience when that happens. So whenever there is no cart in the system, we automatically create it and allow end users to have a more seamless shopping experience. And we also introduced a preference so that in terms of backwards compatibility, if some customers are already used to the previous behavior, they can set it to false. Okay, so that's for the feature or I would say kind of GUI improvements that made through in this release. Another change that we're introducing in this release is the ability to, we are applying some changes to the licensing consumption model. Up until this version, we also monitored or kept track on concurrent usage, regardless of how many sessions has been created by each user. So we kind of certain users or customers kind of possibly manipulated that. But with that version, we are starting to track user sessions as well, so that every session that's being created by users on potentially different web browsers are going to consume more licenses. So for that example, if a single user opens two browsers and in that regard, it will consume two licenses. We are still not tracking or skipping the use cases where the user is opening multiple types on the same browser. So that's still going to be counted as a single license. But when it comes to using, the same user credentials on multiple environments or multiple browsers, that's going to be now counted or consume more licenses. So that's very important change for all our customers to be aware of. And lastly, in terms of additional highlights or things for you to consider when you plan to upgrade to that release 7.1, MongoDB, and that's part of our overall PTC strategy or policy with respect to third-party components. All of the third-party components that used to be bundled with ACD are now externalized or needs to be deployed and installed separately. And that includes MongoDB as well. We are no longer bundling that piece of that component, and customers are required to install and update it separately. That actually provides more flexibility to keep that component up to date. And we also recommend customers to install the enterprise rather than the community version if possible. This is nice to have, but from the security and vulnerability standpoint, we consider the enterprise version a lot more suitable for production use in ACD. The other piece that I also mentioned earlier, we are removing any sensitive IP or engineering attributes from the 3D illustrations, the PVZs that's getting published and delivered through ACD. So that has been introduced earlier in form of hotfix or certain subset of capabilities been introduced in earlier CPSs, but the full functional capability is now part of 7.1. As I mentioned, we also support larger SVG files, which was important for many customers of ours to be able to deliver. We also introduced a new flow for guest users. It still requires custom work, but we're also planning to further enhance it and make it hopefully part of out of the box in the future coming versions in years to come. So that's on our list. And lastly, in terms of certain components that used to be there in the product but kind of discontinued, ClearView has been officially discontinued. We're only supporting TeamView now for 3D visualization. Performance Advisor is also discontinued, as well as the CGM to SVG converter. That's been there in earlier versions as a kind of add-on tool. So customers that need to deliver CGMs would need to find another way to convert those to SVG if needed, or just deliver SVGs, which is more common nowadays. So this is for a couple of things that I wanted to mention that will be important for customers considering an upgrade to 7.1. And I think that's probably my last slide or overview of 7.1 highlights for today. I think we still got some time for questions, so if you have anything in the queue.
We don't have anything currently in the Q&A, but if anyone wants to add anything, feel free.
Okay, yeah, so we'll give it another minute, and as always, if you have any questions or want, feel free to reach out to myself, Patty, or Simon here. And we hope that this session today was useful and informative for customers and stakeholders.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice rest of the day. Bye-bye.